Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and today I am so pleased to be joined by director-producer David A. Roberts. He's produced hundreds of commercials for clients such as Jaguar, DHL, and Land Rover, and his first full-length directorial debut, Patriarch, we're hoping will be dropped in the winter of 2021. David, how you doing today, brother?
I'm not bad. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. We've been having a very nice talk before we actually got started with the episode. Things are kind of crazy right now with COVID and everything, but what updates can you give us about Patriarch and what we can expect from this film?
So we're right in the middle of casting it. We are actually looking for people who, because you can tell by my funky accent, I'm from the UK. So we're trying to find obviously people because it'll be in sale in the US and it's going to be released in the US as well. So we're going a good mix of UK. There might be UK actors because we're filming the UK, but hopefully recognizable in the US. So certain shows and things which are obviously big there. But we're location scouting at the moment. So we're basically building up to filming in January, which we're all crazy excited about. And obviously the production company, as you're saying, we've cut our teeth in commercials, so to speak, but we all started this in the first place to make sure we were doing feature films, but it's just getting there, and finally we've got a production company and grew successful enough that it got to the point where we've got all the gear and the in-house production facilities and the post-production, things like that, where I think I was saying before, where we can do films for $5 million, which would cost other people 10, 20 million, because we've kind of got everything in-house, which is obviously investors like, so it became a bit easier when we're going around. But hopefully I'll keep you in the loop, but hopefully we should have some casting news very soon, because this has all happened really quickly, because we've had the script for a while, and it was very strange that we just got loads of interest from loads of different really quickly. I think the strange thing is, do you know where a lot of filmmakers, where COVID has actually hurt them? Ours is actually, because what Patriarch, it's should I tell you the story? What kind of like what's about? Just
Absolutely.
It's a sci-fi horror, so your fans should like it as yourself. But it's kind of set. It's basically after a kind of cataclysmic disaster which destroyed all life in a kind of 100-mile radius of part of the country, becoming a quarantine zone. After kind of like a Chernobyl type research accident. So it kills all life. It becomes a big part of the country becomes a quarantine zone, and nothing happens after that for 7 years, until 7 years later, kind of a lone scientist who worked at this research facility walks out of the quarantine zone, and he's talking about the end of the world and how he's seen things that can't be explained, and they're coming for us. So there's a kind of the stories out, but going back to the kind of the COVID thing is, it's actually, even though it's kind of a big story and we actually got to film it, it's actually small because it's set in a kind of military facility and this quarantine zone. So the facility is what's kind of security for the zone. And, but there's only a handful of characters. I mean, you've got 1 million of the same guard going around in like a cartoon type background. Yeah. You'd have to pay for loads of extras, but it's not a huge film. We've got about, will be about $4 million, so it's big, but to us, but not to everybody else. But it's still, in terms of, there's only a handful of characters in the kind of, there's an interrogation room, there's an operations room, lots of stuff happens in hallways, very much like we're going to talk about the film we're going to talk about, and the rest of it is kind of outside, where we go into this quarantine zone, where a lot of people thinking it's a zombie film because they say quarantine. I think it's not. It's more kind of I think fans of Stranger Things and Black Mirror, Dark, if you've seen Dark on Netflix, it's more kind of parallel worlds and gateways to other places and things like that. So it's kind of a good mix of sci-fi and horror. Kind of like the film we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's something that we're about to talk about here in a minute anyway. So, and I'm very excited. Sci-fi horror is probably my favorite genre. it's something that, before we get into that film, did this film that we're about to talk about influence Patriarch at all?
Yes, I'd say, yeah, in every way. It's kind of one of those where there's no, there's more creatures in that, where ours isn't really creatures.
Right.
But in terms of the pace of it, very much so. In terms of the dialogue, very much, it's kind of, yeah, ever since. I mean, this is all talking about the first horror film we ever watched, and I'm saying how it's weird how the first one I ever watched resonated years later, and it's still one of my favorite films. I think it's because, I don't know, it might be because I watched it with my dad when I was young, so I then had fond memories of watching it when I shouldn't be watching it at that age. My dad showing me before my mum comes finds out. But then as you become a filmmaker, you're kind of the weird things you find out about the film, which is kind of, yeah, it's just little things from dialogue, character, story, direction, everything really. There's not much that doesn't inspire it really. It's a different story, but fans of it would like Patriarch. So yeah.
Okay. And that's what I was gonna say. Even though, like, that's why I like to do this with our first horror movie, because I think the first horror movie always is an influence on us. I mean, House, can't really see because of the glare, but House from 1986 was mine. And that's something that I reference all the time, every day in my personal life. And it's something that's influenced me. And it influenced you to the point where you're going to be making Patriarch. And let's get into it. The first horror movie, if you guys haven't figured it out yet, the first horror movie that you ever watched was
Aliens. So I was kind of unsure because I was thinking I've seen a million slashes and things like that in terms of like, is Aliens horror for you, proper horror fans, so to speak? But I think it's got so much in it in terms of, but it's just from watching it when I was small. I think I'm saying, I mean, we can get into it a bit more, but just the first thing of, I went into it cold. I hadn't seen Alien. I just watched it. I say it's called Alien, so you should expect some aliens to be in it. But you didn't realize how terrifying, because nothing looks like the designer H.R. Giger made for Alien. Nothing has come close to being like it, especially at that point. And it's terrifying, and just the way it was filmed in the dark. But if you think about it, half of the film, it's like a cool action film with these really cool soldiers that everybody wants to be like, and then they all go into this hive, and then it just takes a turn, and then. But I couldn't stop watching. So it's I don't know what that says about me, even as a little one, but I couldn't stop watching. Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. You're talking about the hive and everything, but which scene from Aliens affected you the most, and why?
It would be the hive, that it would be the going into the hive. So it's not really the people being run apart, and it's even before it all kicks off and it all kind of the aliens come out the walls. Mm-hmm. It's just that when you cut him back to Ripley, and is it Gorman, the lieutenant, saying, "We're all fine. Let's keep going." And she's going, "Get them out of there. Something bad. Yep. This is gonna," and you just know it's gonna go. And I love that tension build. And that kind of always stuck with me, because I was always kind of weird where once the monster came out, I was watching it, where I'd start covering ears, or cover my ears, or cover my eyes, or sort of what if it would be before you see it. That's what I always think. Well, good horror, anything is, what's terrifying is what you don't see. And it was really that build up. And even at that young age, you still know that something bad is I don't know how bad it's going to be. And then when these things come to war, and they are actually these terrifying creatures you've never seen. And especially to a little kid, where you think the alien is that, the big head with the two big grey eyes. And then you see that, and which looks like the most terrifying insect you've ever seen.
Right. And I love how this one,
sorry, go on.
They still have the chest burster in this one.
Yeah, it's when they find, I think, is that a kid or a girl? I can't remember, but it's something against the wall. Mm-hmm. And that's and that's the first real jump. And as soon as that chest burster comes out, that just sets the rest of them off, doesn't it? And the brilliant thing about Aliens, I always thought, is the most terrifying bit, and it's James Cameron did a beautiful piece of filmmaking when it came to building tension, and that's the motion tracker. Do you remember the motion with that noise? We just got the click, 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 and then it would get click faster when something was near, and then you'd see the red dot on the screen. You didn't need to see an alien. That by itself was like, whoa, something's coming. But it's a real, it's what you don't see. That's what I always tell a bad horror by they just show it all the time. I mean,
Yep.
some you do, but the best ones, they don't show it until they have to. Before then, you see a behind the head or silhouette, shadow or something like that. That's always best. You leave it till the end of the film to, I mean, it's not a huge, but even Jaws, you know, that's kind of like around the time before all horrors kind of really kicked in, of that kind of blockbuster horror, even though it's still kind of a slasher 18 type thing. But you don't see the shark until you have to see it type thing, and that is the being scared of. That music comes on, and there you go. It's the same thing with Aliens or any good horror. I don't know what you think, but
that tension build to me is huge. That's a huge, huge thing because, like you said, if you see the killer the whole time, there's no tension there. Yeah, you can have jumps, but tension is the anxiety build. You know, a lot of the paranormal activities and conjurings are good at that too. You know, you don't have to see anything. You know, you know it's there, and you have that tension and that anxiety, and you know it's there, but you don't see it. To me, that's absolutely that. I love that. I absolutely love that.
I've liked. There's a couple of films recently where, because sometimes they hide it with cheap jumps. You know, you'll have quiet, jump, quiet. There's some films which are just that anxiety and tension never seem to stop. So, I mean, off the top of my head, have you seen Hereditary? It's not like a real. But there seems to be, there's no jumps. It's just weird and creepy. And I was watching it going, I like this. It was just, but I think sometimes some people lean into that quiet, jump, quiet. Yeah. So as you say, it's the anxiety of waiting for this jump. And I think if the jump doesn't actually come, that makes it much worse. Yeah. But as a horror experience, it's awesome, you know, so.
Yeah, because you're sitting there and your anxiety, your heart's beating, and you're like, just do it already so I can stop feeling like this. And they just keep you hanging and keep you hanging. And
we all know it's coming. We all don't go into that room. Why are you going upstairs? Just leave the house. But it's still I think that adds to it a bit in terms of, I don't mind.
100%.
Especially a horror film. I was thinking horror films, I watch a million films. But this horror films especially are so great with watching with somebody else that even though you know it's coming and you can be shouting at this, it's the only genre where I kind of accept shouting at the screen. You know, where you don't really want that in a cinema, but you can see, just don't go up the stairs. Leave me alone. He's clearly bad for you. Why are you staying with that guy? You know, that kind of thing. So, but without the kind of that tension build and going back to Aliens, even as a youngster, you could know that something bad is going to happen. And then with Aliens, it wasn't really a jump thing. It's just an explosion of violence and terror. And another good, what's the word? Another good, bit of filmmaking from James Cameron was he showed most of the carnage on those kind of like shoulder cams rather than actually there. You saw the odd bit and bob, but most of it is shaky, body cam stuff, isn't it? Of them shouting, "We got to get the fuck out of here."
Yeah. Well, and you're talking about the influence of aliens. Something as small as how many times in other film or in TV shows have you heard the Bill Paxton, it's game over, man. Game over.
Aliens have been that you see so much, like there's like I was saying to somebody the other day, there's probably lots before it, but the first film I ever noticed where the toughest person in the film was a woman, Vasquez, where she's the toughest dude in the room. And so many films, and there's so many, like they write a woman who's a Vasquez, and they just never are. It's always kind of, they always try, but she was so good in that. And so but you got to think she's the toughest in the room. And then the second toughest is probably Ripley. So it's actually a really cool film for, I think I actually when I talk to a lot of women actors that, when they're saying they want better role, like where they're not the arm candy or they're not the script. I say, well, do more sci-fi or horror. Well, usually the strong, you do tend to have the strong woman and then the other one behind them who's screaming all the time. But it's still, there's more of them. There's you can get, but I think you don't want to do a period drama all the time. If you want to do a strong, confident woman, sci-fi and horror is full of them. So I was thinking, from the slasher side, from creature film is usually a woman is usually one of the strongest people in the room, and I think that started. There's probably plenty before, and for me, Aliens was the one that kind of influenced everything afterwards in terms of.
I mean, they have the term
copying the
final girl.
characters.
You know, just because of horror sci-fi movies, you have your final girl that outlasts the slasher all the time. You know, I mean, you got Ripley, you got Jamie Lee Curtis.
Ripley was the final girl in Aliens, essentially, wasn't it? She wasn't tough and she didn't go around with a flamethrower and stuff, but she was still at the end and tough, and she was kind of terrified the whole way through. And at the end, she was the one that blew it out the airlock and all that. And
Vasquez, you were talking about Vasquez. She also has that human side when I can't think of his name, but when he gets taken and she's trying, you know, like you have that emotional side of her as well, you know, because that was really her best friend.
When she gets picked off, there's a really nice where she holds her hand with what's his name on the bomb and blow each other up, and that's like, oh, that's good because she's. But yeah, you'll see the. Have you seen the latest Stranger Things series by any chance? I hope I'm not spoiling any. But there's a. I think they do an homage rather than just copying Aliens. But there's the going into the hive scene where they go in under say, and then all of the creatures are coming toward, and they're watching a screen with dots coming towards them and things like that. And I'm going to put my hands up, and there is a series, a scene quite similar to that in Patriarch. I'm not going to lie, it's different, but there's that tension build. Something's happening. People in an operations room are watching. Something bad's going to happen, and couldn't resist. So, but you see,
excited, man.
Yeah, Bill Paxton. I'll tell you what, Bill Paxton, I don't get real sad when like actors pass away that stranger didn't know. But genuinely, when Bill Paxton passed away, there was a bit of me that kind of went, oh, that just ruined your week or something like that, because he was great and everything. But every copy, you got Hicks, the coolest guy. I wanted to be Hicks when I was young. Nobody wanted to be Hudson because he was just squealing all the time. But you do see there was a point to him because he was like he's supposed to be the audience. I always say you want to be Hicks or Vasquez or Ripley. And what's weird is there's so many films with just soldiers in it, where unless you do have, the Latino guy, the black guy, unless you've got, they often just look at the same shaved head guys. Yep. When Aliens, you just knew they all had different characters, especially when, a bunch of them got wiped out, but the ones that were left were actually...
You knew that was your character development right there.
Characters, all different. One was cool, one was just the toughest, one was just all over the shop. But yeah, it was great. And you always seem to have the corporate guy now in loads of films. Do you know when they have is it Paul Reisner, he was Paul Reisner before then. You always seen the corporate guy who's there doing the sneaky stuff, and Alien seems to be just like a template that people take and change and make a million other
things. Talk about Paul Reisner. I could never take him serious in Mad About You, the TV show. Like all I could see was aliens. Like, you're going to turn your back on her, you son of a bitch.
yeah. He's betraying you somehow. Yeah, it's because I knew him from Aliens before anything else. So yeah, so even that would just be. Has he impregnated her with an alien or something?
You slimy bastard.
But he's so good in that. He's so that because he starts off as the guy who seems to be rescuing Ripley. He's friendly, he's helpful. He gets her back.
You want to root for him.
That's it. You think he's one of the good guys, and then he's such a scumbag at the end of it. And he's brilliant in it. So it must be really weird for anybody watching his comedy and then watching like at the time in the 80s, going from that to the other. But well, I suppose they say comedians, it's harder to make people laugh than cry. So comedians usually tend to be good actors anyway. So I've tend to found them a time. It's tricky to make a serious actor funny. I've found in my experience anyway.
Well, let me ask you this then. We're talking about aliens. When someone brings up aliens in a conversation, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
They mostly come at night. You think it's either the creature, because the creature and what's brilliant about it is the reproductive system, should we say, from face hugger to chest burster, egg to face hugger to chest burster, to think where there's nothing, there's not a lot of, you've a lot of copied afterwards, but it wasn't that kind of beforehand. Right. But it just seems to be every single line in it can be pretty quotable. Game Over Man, mostly Somebody Wake Up Hicks. It's just line after line.
Yeah.
And what's weird is in the office, in the production studios here, because we all run a reasonably sized production company now, but we're all nerds at heart. So you just get if anybody says kind of a certain word, like somebody says, well, it's mostly this, that, and the other. You just hear somebody else in the background go, mostly. It must have come out at night. So it's just get away from her, you bitch. There's just so many iconic lines, and you hear those lines in so many other films. You'll probably see a million of them in mine coming up, but not so much the lines, but the concept of. But no, it's either, well, the first thing I remember, sorry, in a long-winded way, it's the coolness of the creature, because I think there's so many. The Predator looks good, but that's Stan Winston as well, and Stan Winston is
a genius.
Was the man when it came to anything in those. But nothing. Can you think of any other alien or creature that it might be cool or suit the story, but in terms of just being different and being something you haven't seen before, or it's usually either a load of tentacles or it's a big creature, or it looks like a humanoid. That just looks like something you've never seen, like a mixture of a lizard, like an insect, a man, a dragon, maybe in a way. But it's and I always think on the face hugger, it's just horrible how it looks like a hand because it's got knuckles. And has it got nails on it? I can't remember. It's got I think it might have fingernails at the end of it as well.
Yeah, but you got the one that's coming against the glass, which is another scene that's copied in thousands of films.
Yeah.
That's such a terrifying scene because you're seeing it trying to grab onto the face and you see what's happening.
Yeah.
It's like that's what's happening inside your body.
Yeah, and it's kind of, like in the first Alien, when you see it, you try and take it off, and then the tail just twirls and starts getting tighter, and you're like, oh, and then having acid for blood. Nobody's ever thought about that. It's like a beautiful piece of writing in terms of, well, we can't shoot the thing. Really, happens in Aliens. They try it and doesn't go well. It's because it's usually most creatures are usually sold by guns in most films, aren't they? But it was like automatically, you can't do that. You can't even kill it really, because then it'll go through, especially in Alien, it'll go through the hull, and we're suckers into space. So it's just brilliant little reasons why you can't kill something which is terrifying and something you have to kill. It's genius, really. So it's little. It's not even little things, but it is things that. Never mind the look of it and the acting and all that. It's just kind of you've come up with a concept for a creature that is going to cause problems to anybody who comes near it.
How can we make it more dangerous? How can we make this dangerous thing more dangerous? Oh, I know. When you kill it, it kills you with its blood.
With its tongue. You never seen that before, because it kills you with it's got a tail which could whip you and stab you. It's got you've never seen a mouth on the end of a tongue before, which is again brilliantly creepy. There's so many ways it can kill you, and then Aliens up the game by actually having the Queen as well, which wasn't in Alien, and that was just James Cameron's. But that is brilliant by itself, and
that's a scene I actually wanted to talk to you about, because I like how in this movie with the Queen they almost make you feel something for the Queen when Ripley has the flamethrower and she's pointed at the egg, so the Queen calls everybody else off.
Yeah, my wife Holly's always kind of like she's just protecting the babies. What was it? Just leave her alone. Yeah, but no, I don't think it quite works like that. But that's really cool as well to show that she's smart. Yeah, the ones are just that you always thought they're monsters, but just the way she looks that way and they all back off. You're like, oh. So then it becomes a duel kind of between her and Ripley about not just who's the biggest killer. It's like who's the smartest out of you as well, which is kind of scarier in a way. Where I always think kind of just a big dumb creature is not particularly scary. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not. I used to be into The Walking Dead, but I'm not. But I would say my least scariest creature has always been a zombie, because I always thought they're dumb, so they just usually they walk really slow, so you could just, as long as you walk slightly faster than them, you'll get right away from them. I think 28 Days Later changed that, where they started sprinting, and then they were terrifying because they were kind of they had some smartness to them, and they sprinted at you, and that was
Yeah,
But
the
now that gets
2003 Dawn of the Dead too did that as
yeah,
well.
that's right, actually, yeah.
You know, I
So,
loved it.
but I think, but it's when they were dragging their feet, not so much, and they were just dumb automaton type thing, didn't it?
Yeah.
But as soon as you show a bit of intelligence in there, that actually becomes scary because you go, well, that's going to be harder. If I run, that's going to be harder to lose them because
Right.
they'll know I'm going to go this way or that way, you know? So it's weird how, because we were talking about that in the development of Patriarch in terms of what makes a good, because I say we don't have aliens or something, but there's like a figure type thing. And what makes things creepy, it's intelligence in a weird way, because it's kind of, if it knows what you're doing, the smartest creatures are, I still have, I don't know what you think of Predator, but I still have Predators as a, I love Predator. So you can tell sci-fi horror seems to be my thing. But surely I can't do spoiler alerts for Predator. There's been, I can say, surely at this point. But there's the bit at the end where he's set up all of these traps and the Predator looks down and then he sees the spikes and he kind of feels them. And then he walks around and you get that big, because that's intelligence, which is strange because obviously you need him to be a creature that could kill you easily. But there's nothing more scary than a smart one. And Aliens is great at that as well.
And I always go back to, I don't know if you remember Tremors.
Oh, I love Tremors. I love Tremors.
How they adapt throughout the movie, you know, how they spit the bomb out, how they start to, you know, wait by the rocks, you know, like those are terrifying creatures because not only can you not see them, but they don't have to see you to know where you're at. Yeah. And then they start adapting as the movie goes. And I'm one of the people that I actually like. The only one I didn't like was the Old West Tremors. I think it was 4. But I love the Tremor series, man.
I must admit, I think I watched 2. I watched the 1 and 2, and I wasn't too. I think it just wasn't as good. So I didn't keep going. But I think, do you know a term I hate? I hate the term guilty pleasure because I heard somebody say, "Oh, it's a guilty pleasure." No, it's not. It's I'm proud of everything that I like. I'll tell you if I don't. How can you be ashamed of something that you like? It's just like it. It's not guilty. But Tremors is the kind of thing. It's a B movie. It's a bit weird, but I think it was quite. It's actually surprisingly well made from a filmmaker's side because you say it's got that Jaws thing. Exactly what you're saying. With you don't know where it is until it kind of pops up and. Yeah, no, it's exactly the same thing. It's as soon as they show a bit of intelligence, you're like, oh, that changed the game a bit because it's always good when you start assuming that they're dumb, and then you become smarter. And the best ones you can always any of the best monsters, slasher killers type guys. Excuse me, they were usually the guys who outsmart you a bunch of times, because that's what makes it really terrifying.
Leave it with Jason. You know, you're running the whole time. He walks and knows right where you're at.
No, yeah.
A couple more questions for you about aliens before I let you go. This one is probably the hardest one for me, but which death in this movie affected you the most?
I'd say it's actually about when Drake dies. Don't you know Drake, the guy Vasquez's mate? I would say Hudson when he gets pulled into the ground, but I think it's the first real one that. Because they all drop like flies, and he's the only one that you kind of got to know. And then he goes in a bad way where he gets hit by acid, and then he blows a flamethrower so that starts making their life more difficult than it needs to be in the truck. That was the first one that kind of like I just always remember that one. But the heartbreaking one's Hudson. You may think he's a wee squealer and a bit of a. Well, you say he does have a good turn because he seems like he's a wimp the whole way through, but he does go down fighting. He's like, God, you, and then he gets sucked out. It's just the fact that you see an alien hand go on his face and drag him down, and Hicks is trying to get him. That's the one that's heartbreaking. I mean, you could say the Vasquez one where they hold their hands together and they blow, but it's Hudson, isn't it? He's kind of, you do feel for the guy, especially because at that point he's like, come on then, let's do it. And then too little, too late, so to speak.
Right. So we've talked about aliens. That's your first horror movie. One question I have for you. What is your favorite horror movie?
Might be Aliens as well. It's probably The Thing. I don't know, there's a running theme of sci-fi horror, but The Thing in terms of, again, is what you don't see is the paranoia. It's like the scene, or again, a scene that's been copied in a million different films is the scene where they're all testing the blood. To see who it is. And I'm a massive fan of practical effects, which we were talking about before we started. And I will go back. Can I go back to Aliens one quick just to say that my favorite, for all of you, if you watch Aliens again, one thing to look for is right at the end when the facility is exploding. As the ship's taken away, you see all the clouds, and then you see the explosion slowly move up. Now, I found out that it's the coolest effect in the world because somebody didn't have long to do, because usually people throw money at the problem. So, we've only got long, throw money at it and we'll make it a big fancy, but they didn't have that. So what they did, I feel bad, I can't remember the guy's name, but what they did is they just had like a mound of cotton wool. So it's just a white soft wool, and they turned a light bulb on. But they filmed it in slow motion. So it's basically cotton wool with a light coming on really slowly. So it looks like this huge nuclear explosion's happening, and then they superimpose so it's so simple, but brilliant. Yeah. And we've always found the simplest one is really brilliant. So, and just with the thing, if you notice, do you know I don't know if you know, but if, do you know when they're doing the blood test where they put the metal into the blood?
Yeah.
Kurt Russell's got his hands up like this and he's holding the jar and he gets a different piece of blood and blood. Well, I never noticed till years later that this is a fake hand, because once he touches, a big load of tentacles or whatever it is shoots out of it. But that's not Kurt Russell's hand. That's a fake hand where obviously somebody just pushes up again, right. Simple as anything, but when it happens, you're like, it's a proper jump. So his hand's obviously at his side, his real hand is. It's little things like that. And these are like big films with big budget to doing other effects. But the best ones for me are the little ones. Like on Aliens again, we've actually copied something from Aliens in terms of, because there is a moment where there's a firefight when people opening fire into the darkness, not knowing what's there. Where there's a bit with Aliens where they learn when you're in the dark, the muzzle flare doesn't really do a big flash. So from Aliens, we found out that they use strobes off camera, and that kind of lights the room up, and you can time the strobe to the muzzle flare. So every time somebody fires, and it's a really cool effect. But I didn't get that from film school. I didn't get that from all the commercials I've directed. I got that from listening to the Aliens commentary. That's where I got that from. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, I always kind of think the thing in Aliens hand in hand, kind of very similar to anxiety as a paranoia in there. You don't see the creature all the way through. When you do see a creature, it's very unique and something you haven't seen before. And I'd say they both stand up pretty well today. I think I watched the sequel to The Thing, which or prequel technically, the new one, and it was all CGI, and it was just kind of that's not for me. Apparently, I read the other day they actually did everything practical. But the producers weren't a fan of it, and then they did CG over the practical.
You can find the practical on YouTube. A good friend of mine that I did an episode with actually sent it to me. You can find the practical, and I was talking about how I'd love for them to release a practical cut, but it was just announced today. I don't know if you've seen it or not. Blumhouse Pictures announced that they're working with John Carpenter on The Thing reboot. That was actually just announced today.
Do you know if it's like a reboot or like a sequel? Or...
It's a reboot to the first one.
Okay.
So as long as I don't know how I feel about that, because
I'm not sure how I feel about that. Well, I do like Blumhouse. I think I love his business model in terms of he has. I think it's like you have 5 million, you do this, and they all seem to be good.
And John Carpenter's a part of it. John Carpenter's on board, so that makes me. I mean, I'm not one of those people that thinks reboots and remakes are inherently bad. I like a lot of the reboots that have come out. I won't.
A good film's a good film. And I just say, if it's a carbon copy of the first one, that's when it's a problem. If they do something new with it, I'm trying to think off the top. Have you got any favorite reboots, would you say?
Oh, man. I love the Dawn of the Dead 2003, Child's Play, Friday the 13th. Also, the Evil Dead reboot. I thought the Evil Dead reboot was phenomenal, and it was all practical effects. So as long as it's done right, I was not a fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. I didn't like it. It was not my cup of tea.
Do you think that was the film, or anybody but Robert Englund as Freddy?
See, I think it was the film, because I didn't mind the guy they had doing Freddy.
Because he's a good actor. He's in like Watchmen and that, isn't he? But
And it's just,
But
I don't know. I will never shit on anybody's work. I'll never say anything's terrible, because if you're out there making a film, kudos to you. You're making art.
yeah,
Good job. But
yeah,
it just, the Nightmare remake, it just wasn't for me. I don't know. I don't like the fact that he was a child molester in this one. I don't know. There was just so much about it
yeah.
that, and like you said,
Yeah, I know
carbon
what you mean.
copy.
Yeah. When you
They
change the
took
character as an iconic character, it changed the story, not the character.
right,
It's
and even the effect where he comes through the wall. That's one of my favorite practical effects of all time. And when you do this one and you make it all CGI, it didn't look good at all to me.
yeah.
That one scene alone
Well,
made me so bummed
yeah,
out.
because it's that thing of real simple. It's just well, not like it's lycra, whether it's just rubber. That's so simple and
Yeah.
brilliant. Where as soon as you, because that whole thing, well, maybe in the 80s it might be different, but if I was going to do that practical effect now, it would cost me a couple of $100, maybe,
Mhm.
apart from the cameras and all that. But to do the CGI version of it, you're talking thousands. So I
Yeah.
don't. It's and if it's not improving what you've done, don't do it. It's
And that's what I said. The practical one looked better. Like, it
and
looked
that's
so
it.
much better.
I'm not one of those guys which is like no CGI at all. It's got to be practical. But it's just I always think the best CGI is the ones you don't notice. As soon as you
Yep.
know, it's like I don't like CGI full characters. I don't mind CGI environments or you rubbing out things. I don't mind that. But I think it's full creatures or things like that because that's a creature and an effect. And
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
can tell right away.
that's not. I'm tarring what's it called? Tarring them all up there, but but generally it's kind of I'm fine with CGI, but it's got to improve it, not just be just the easier
Yes.
way of doing it, which I think a lot of times to do. It just means, oh, that might take a few hours to set up that stretchy wall. Be like, yeah, but it takes you days and weeks in post production. So what's the difference? So that's me.
Right. And what's going to make it look better? That's what we should always be asking. What
That's
looks
it.
the
Yeah,
best?
yeah. And what takes you out the
So
story? Because at
one
the end of
last
the day,
question for you.
oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I
no,
was
no,
just
go
going to
ahead.
say, it's we always say it's kind of like not even just like CGI or say if you're just doing a wide shot, for example, and then for some reason I cut into a funky Dutch angle and things like that where there's no reason for it and it just takes you out the story. It's not good. So if you have a shot which takes you out, as soon as you're seeing somebody, because I was watching the new Terminator recently, and I actually thought it was really good. I kind of got slagged off a lot, but I thought it was, apart from one bit where he's running and then he turns into a jumping CGI man, and that's when it ruins it. So, but he didn't need to. Why didn't he just run after it? You don't need to do the jump bit and save yourself $1 million for visual effects as well. But
Right. So let's see. My one last question for you on Alien. This is how I always end the episodes. Skull count. 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. Where are you ranking Aliens?
Alien 5. Come on. Why are we even doing this if it's not? But I suppose you do have people coming in on the air, which is just the first one they watched was just terrible. But I think I was quite lucky with first one I watch, and it'll probably be the last one I watch as well.
Such an iconic movie, man. I'm glad I got this. Is the first time I've talked about Aliens on the podcast, so I appreciate you letting me do that. Like I said, anytime you have any updates about Patriarch, please let me know so I can keep everybody else updated. Don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Keep talking horror. Stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.